Well, hey, y'all, and welcome to the Everyday Truths podcast, where we break down truths that are true today and every day so that we can go and live them out in our lives. My name is Sherry, and I am the creator of Everyday Truths. And today, we are having an awesome conversation with my friend, Gabby Garcia. And we are going to be breaking down and uncomplicating the idea of who we should be following in our lives, people worth following. I know this conversation can have an impact right now in your day, and I'm so excited for you to hear it. So let's get into it. Well, hey there, Gabby.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I've been really, really excited about this conversation, just both because I super love you and this topic's awesome. I want folks to get to know you a little bit, but I never loved the awkward, so tell us about yourself.
Here we go.
And so we're going to do something completely different. I'm going to tell you something about Gabby, and then we're going to do something fun. I can't even remember when we first met.
I can't either.
But
Can't picture my life without you anymore.
I love that. You know what? That's exactly
that.
true for me too. Yeah.
No, you're just,
Oh my
you've always been there,
goodness.
but you haven't.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. So you aren't from San Antonio. Tell everybody where you're from.
They can probably guess. New York City.
New York
New York.
City. We all have accents. And so your accent has definitely mellowed over the last few years. And so, but I want us to, have a moment where we're going to say some things that New Yorkers maybe say different or have a different accent for, just for fun.
I hope I don't disappoint.
And so, well, right now I need to get you in a New York mindset. I have some sounds.
Oh, you did homework. Oh, that's helpful.
I'll turn it off just so you
Did
can
you
hear us better.
YouTube that or?
It is 100% 10 hours of New York sounds. I don't even know. People sleep to that or
It was a
something.
little too accurate.
Yep. All right. So I don't want to say the word and then make you say it back. Instead,
Okay.
I'm going to kind of lead you there. And so you have a dresser. What is it that you open?
The drawer.
Say
Open
it again.
The drawer. Now I'm going to leave with all of these insecurities about words I didn't know.
A drawer. I can't even say it correctly. All right. Let's see. It's made of wax and you color with it.
A crayon?
2 syllables. Most of us are 1 syllable.
Really?
Crown.
No.
Mhm.
Nope.
Crown.
No way.
Yeah, I do. I
Fake news.
actually do say it in 2 syllables, but no, most people say it single syllable. Crown. A beverage that someone drinks in the morning.
Coffee.
Coffee. Can you say it not coffee?
Coffee.
All right, here you
Coffee.
go. H2O.
Water.
Okay. All right, it's that R. All right.
The DER at times.
What is a candy bar made out of?
Chocolate.
There's not a W, man.
Are-
There's not a W in chocolate. Say it again.
Chocolate.
There you go. All right. An animal you would put on a leash and walk.
A dog. You're not going to fix that. It's a dog.
It's a dog.
We got dogs.
All right. Let's see. All right. And this is my very favorite one because Gabby is a part of an incredible ministry called Whatever is True Sisterhood. They have a podcast. You should listen to it. And Gabby.
I can't even. I get called out for this.
Oh my goodness. It's my favorite thing. And it comes out when she's praying specifically. What do you know what I'm going to say? It's blank of the Most High.
Of course. Daughter of the Most
Daughter. It's like
Daughter.
We're praying and she's, yeah. And
so
she's
intensely. Daughter of the Most High.
Daughter
God.
of the Most High. And it's so good. And I'm like, Sherry, focus. What's other ones that you've been called out for in the past?
It's usually the speed and the accent that comes out when I'm frustrated or excited about something.
Oh,
or
yeah,
just
yeah,
being
yeah.
intense. It's like, especially folks here, they literally step back a little bit.
Yeah, because there's just a different energy. One time I was with you and it was Trudy Leal, and you guys had, what was it?
Oh, yes. We were talking about sofrito and arroz con gandules and all the Puerto Rican food I miss.
But then y'all started talking and it was like New York, Puerto Rican. And I was like, what is happening?
Yeah,
Like
whole
I was
different.
so excited to introduce you guys to each other and I regretted it immediately.
It got significantly louder but
It
quickly.
was intense. It was intense.
Yeah.
All right. So today's topic, and I knew you were going to have great things to say about this. And so that's why I was excited to invite you to do this. I'm so grateful that you accepted the invite. We've been talking about uncomplicating faith, lots of great topics. I know you were somebody, you didn't grow up in church.
No, it's why I love you so much, because I can go to you and say, Sherry, make it make sense.
Make it make sense. You do say that a lot. Make it make sense.
Make it make sense.
But I want to hone in on a specific topic today. And it's one that I don't think we think about often because we've talked about scripture, we've talked about applying it, we've talked about some characters of God, like characteristics of God. But today I want us to talk about people worth following because let's get down to it. We all follow.
Yeah.
We all follow people. And so tell me about, like, what do you think? Like when I say, hey, people that you follow, what are kind of some things that come into your mind?
Well, I work in social media, so instantly followers and the increase in celebrities, influencers, and things like that, building their following. And because we just finished the election, I'm also thinking about political parties that we follow and ideologies that we follow. But it's something that I've been thinking about, I would say the last few years, a little bit more intentionally in terms of who I'm following and what that looks like and why I'm following. And I know we'll unpack that a little bit, but it's a conversation that you and I used to have quite a bit. And you always had this quote. Do you remember?
No.
About who a leader really is?
Oh, yeah.
Something that's stuck with me.
Yeah, what I've I stole this from someone, but it was, they say there's all kinds of different leaders. And at the end of the day, there's really not. A leader is someone who looks behind them and there are people following. And whether you know it, though, there are people following you.
Absolutely.
And it's not just on social media, because you may be pushing back and you may be like, I'm not a follower, I'm a leader, I charge forward. But the thing is, when I say follower, there are people that influence you. There are people who have impact on you. When they say something, you listen, or maybe you even push back. It's like you're being led in a different way. We all follow people. And the question really is, like, are the people that we follow, like, are they worthy of the weight that we give their words?
That part. I think that's probably the thing that's going to cause people to pause the most and go, well, okay, I guess I can agree that I'm following someone, but have we taken the time to inventory that?
Yeah.
And the impact that they're having in your life. And I know sometimes we go to the social media and the celebrities, but it's more about the folks in your circle, in your day-to-day life that we really should be looking at. Who's having the most impact? Who are you following? What voices are you listening to in your day-to-day decision-making?
Yeah, I even think about simple things. It's like when we find ourselves sounding like our parents.
It's a rough one as a new mom. Well, I can't even say a new mom now, but mom of a 4-year-old. I have these moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, there's Millie. It's my mother right in the mirror.
And so it's whoever it is, we see ourselves taking on these characteristics, or maybe even we're like beating ourselves up because we don't have those.
Yeah.
But they're having an impact anyway. And so in some kind of way, we are following. And so often when we follow, we're giving people authority in our lives. And the tension is when we want to figure out who we are in fact following, I think there are some red flags that we really do need to look for. It's like, are the voices that we are listening to, are they like, should we truly be listening to them, or are they just really convincing? Or do just a lot of people agree with them, and so we feel like we should too? Is it something that's trending? And so everyone right now says this is right, and so we're getting on the bandwagon, right? Right, wrong, or other.
Using their platforms and things like that you're in front of.
Maybe we're following somebody who justifies the kind of behaviors that oh gosh, that hits. I hadn't thought about this
hurts.
one, but there's somebody who, like, they give these qualifiers that justify things that, like, we know aren't right for us. And so it's like we have all these signals coming in. And so the eval is, who are we following? And are they worthy of the weight that we're giving their words?
Yeah. And how do you figure out if you're following them? Like, what are some of the tells?
I think something that I immediately thought of was when that we react to them. When we react to someone, we are giving them some kind of authority. It's a relationship where when they say something, you get angry and you feel like you got to come back. You've just issued them an authority where you may not be following them as far as like their influence, but you are following their lead in that tension, in that conversation. Yeah. You react when they say something, or when they say something, you listen and you do it. And that's not always a bad thing, but it's definitely something that needs to be evaluated.
Yeah. And also maybe some of the folks that you're pursuing. So when you do have to make a big decision, who are the people you're thinking of immediately? Who do you text and call? Who do you go get advice from?
There's a lot of tension in evaluating who you're following, a lot of tension in maybe not that and then realizing how much of your life has been impacted by someone else. If you were given a permission slip, like somebody, some random person in your life, man, this is good. This will preach. All right. So somebody, random person in your life, they bring you a permission slip and it says, hey, do I have your permission to influence your life? And you're like, no. Like you would not sign off that permission if intentionally given the option. But how often are we doing that like without realizing it?
Yeah. Subtly and over long periods of time.
You know how sometimes you'll say like, I don't receive that. I didn't sign that permission slip.
I like it.
I didn't sign that permission slip. You don't get a say in what's going on. You don't get a say in this. I'm not going to listen to the words you're saying because you've proven yourself untrustworthy or whatever that looks like. And
maybe sometimes we are the ones that are offering the permission slip. I think that one's a little more terrifying to dig into.
That's a heart check, man. But to your point, I think as we're going to look at some attributes of people that are worth following. And I think when we see those, we're going to also begin to see them in ourselves. And so that we can recognize like who we're giving permission, but then also like who is it that is following us in one way or another and how we can steward that really, really well.
Absolutely. And maybe even like switching up who that roster is.
Yep.
And going like, hey, let me be more intentional about someone that looks like this or is doing this thing that I aspire to. That's
Love
been
that.
really great for my season in San Antonio. That's what this city has given me. It's given me a lot more folks that I can follow and joyfully follow.
Yes.
And folks that'll hold me accountable, have the kind of life that I aspire to, the kind of family that I want.
You know, Jesus, he showed us so much about what it was like how to follow and how to follow him and what that looks like. But we also then had folks that came on the scene like Paul and like others, and he contextualized it for them. And so he's like, this is what Jesus taught. This is what it looks like in real life. And I think in the same way, we want to have people around us that are contextualizing for us what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus.
Absolutely.
Much like Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. Are we following people who are emulating that same thing? Because it is so significant. You are following people. Are they worthy of the weight that you give their words, their opinions, all of those things, their approval? Oh, goodness. And so I want us to look at some attributes of people worth following. And before we jump in, anything?
When you were talking about the desire to find people that are worth following, it's really the heart for our sisterhood, for the Whatever is True sisterhood. We were finding that we weren't the only women that were struggling to find folks that would hold us accountable, struggling to find people who were desiring the same level of intimacy with God. And like at the heart of it, there was a desire to say, this book says I should have X, Y, and Z in this kind of life if I do this, but I'm not seeing it around me. I'm struggling to find anyone to emulate what the word is saying. By coming together and tackling that together, we've been seeing the fruit.
You realized you were going to have to put in the effort to
it's been work.
to find people worth following, people worth doing life with, people worth the weight, like giving that weight to their words. Yep. And that's amazing. And sometimes it's a great point. Sometimes it's not going to just show up on your doorstep.
I don't think it does. Yeah. I mean, God's good, but if you're not intentionally pursuing this or just making yourself aware, which is why I love this episode, just becoming aware that following is something you're doing and that folks are following you.
Yes.
Puts your life into a completely different lens, I think, and forces you to kind of go like, I need to be more intentional.
Yes. There's something too, if you take your hands off the steering wheel, you're going to drift. Not just because your steering's out of alignment, that happens a lot, but because the road is slanted and there's potholes and it has turns and it has all those things. And so like, let's figure out how to put our hands in the wheel.
Exactly.
But let's talk about the voices we should give some weight to. All right. And the first characteristic, and this is true of Jesus, and I think we see him emulate this beautifully, is people worth following. They want something for you. They don't necessarily want something from you. And when we're in relationship, there is like that give and take, that back and forth. But when you think about, I think we've all known people who just want something from us. They prioritize themselves and what they need over maybe prioritizing your growth. You can be prioritizing each other's growth, but when you have somebody who has no interest and you growing and you changing and you making life better and improving, when you have somebody that's like pushing against that, there's a problem.
And I think sometimes it's right when you hear that, you might be going like to the extremes. I have this thing, I have the house, I have the car, I have access to whatever, and folks are asking for that. And I think of people who are a little bit wealthier, they have to deal with that kind of family dynamic sometimes of like, you only call me when you need money. But I think it's really important to look at the subtle ways as well, where you have people in your life who have maybe been there for a long time, but they tend to leave you feeling drained. Sometimes it's just your time, it's your ear, it's engaging with them in a way that makes them feel a little more comfortable, or a place where they can complain comfortably. That's great. That's part of being a good friend. But I think sometimes we have to reflect on like, should they have as much time as I'm giving them?
But when they're manipulating, or when you see things like gaslighting present, or when they're trying to make you be someone you're not,
Or make you feel bad about not following,
or make you feel bad about being you, man, and that is so critical. And the next is they are considerate of your needs. And these things flow so well together. It's not flippant. It's not, we all say, I snapped at my daughter this morning. I've been thinking about all morning how I need to go apologize to her this afternoon. But that was a moment where I got frustrated and I said something without considering her needs in that moment, and just thinking about myself and my frustration. And so that's a great litmus test.
That's something that you do really well, Sherry. Like, I know this morning you may have had a slip up, but you took a lot of time to show me, and I don't think that you knew you were doing this, but just the intentionality that you walked into every conversation with someone, whether they're new on campus or a repeated conversation that needed to happen. You are one of the most intentional and considerate people I've ever met. You are constantly, and she hates that I'm gassing her up right now, but it is something, it's a bit of your superpower. I've watched you pause long enough to listen. I see you do this in a way where you'll actually go and ask advice before pursuing a hard conversation to make sure that you're coming from the right angle, the right heart space. Like, all of that is an incredible amount of intentionality and consideration for the person on the other side.
And I think this fits well, and I'm not trying to, my natural tendency when somebody comes in and says something like that is to be sarcastic or to play it and downplay it and things like that. And I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to get better. Exactly. Thank you. I received that. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful to that. And I'm not trying to be like, look at my considerate response, but there is,
but there's work behind it. I see you do the work.
Man, and there's so much work behind when there's all of it. But yeah, they listen and they value your perspective. They adapt their approach to how they interact with you, knowing your needs.
Yeah.
And they don't just go, nah, deal with it. This is who I am. Deal with it. You need to hear it straight. They consider
where you are, what you need, the state you're in.
And they adjust to that.
Yeah. One of the like practical ways that you do that is you ask a lot of questions up front. There's no like coming in hot. It's like, let me figure out where we are so I can tailor this appropriately. And that's something I think we can all do a little bit better. Just asking questions first.
I will say, I feel like I'm good at that in like moments I know are going to be tense. I'm not necessarily good at that in everyday moments, which is definitely someplace that I need to be more intentional, and I need to adapt my approach. I think maybe if you're a parent or anybody that's dealt with manager, whoever, you begin to recognize that no two people accept information the same way. Where there's consideration, there's respect. And I hate it when I hear people when they say respect is earned. And if you're sitting there thinking, like, it's not wrong to think that. It makes so much sense. But whether or not you respect someone, it has to do with you and your integrity. Because when you say, I'm going to treat you this way based on something, like they're in the driver's seat.
Waiting for you to earn it with me. It's like, no, absolutely not.
You can be respectful and still have boundaries.
And don't make it hard for folks, right? Like you can keep your boundaries while still treating someone like a whole human and not making it increasingly difficult as if they have to hop through hoops.
Now let's take this big picture, because we're talking about really like interpersonal relationships, but I want to think about, let's think about like online influencers. And so let's pretend like you have a desire to like change the dynamic in your home. You want it to look and feel a certain way. You want to redecorate. Maybe one day you want to build a house. And so you follow folks on social media. You have somebody who it's like emulates like the perfect life and all the perfect things. And then you have somebody like at ground level that's like, hey, I'm on a budget. And hey, this is tough because we have kids rolling around, but can I show you this trick I learned? Okay. And so one of these people is being considerate of you, as in like
where you are in life.
You are their key demographic. And everybody isn't you, but they are creating something considerate of you and their needs. You're their target audience. Whereas somebody else, they may be considering somebody else's needs, but they're not considering you. What they're looking for maybe is like shares, follows, things like that. They've monetized their channels. And so that's a great example of, oh, this person over here, what they've created is something unobtainable. And I may like to follow them because I may want to see myself that way. That may fulfill something in me of like, ooh, like that's how I want to see myself. But there's also within that this reality of like, yeah, you're listening to them, but they have no consideration for who you are. And I think we see the same in interpersonal relationships. It's like people that speak to us. It's like based on who they wish we were. That's different than like people who see more in you than you see in yourself. And so we have that. So they want something for you and not something from you. They are considerate of your needs. And next, they live a life you aspire to.
I feel like that's a really easy one, but also a big one that we miss pretty often. I have this conversation a lot with folks who are newly married or pursuing marriage. It's like you don't want to start talking about marriage with someone who hasn't been married before. It's probably not a great place, not a great resource. And then also there is something to folks who maybe follow your faith and don't, and their perspective on marriage. Like you have to be careful about who you're bringing. I had a friend say like, you don't bring your marriage problems to someone who's not rooting for the two of you.
That right there is so critical, and it flies under the radar. I experienced this so I had a friend group at one point, and I'd gotten married, and the conversations that would happen, and I'm not trying to like knock anybody or anything, but just to your exact example, their spouse would do something bad or they were going through a breakup or whatever, the attitude and the posture of the people in the group was, you don't need that. You go
get
tell
rid of
them
that
off.
man.
You get rid of them. You do all these things. And now, mind you, there's something to trusted advice. There's something to somebody that loves you and trusts you kind of speaking into, hey, you know what? Like you deserve to be spoken to differently, that like you like, or whatever. Yeah. We need those people that'll speak into our lives. But I quickly realized this was a group that if I know that I am for my marriage, and I knew if I walked into this space and I said, hey, you know, Wes and I are struggling with this thing, I knew how they would react because they weren't, there is many aspects to us. And part of that is my marriage. And I knew that they weren't for me in that way. Yeah. And so I'm going, okay, like maybe these are voices that I don't need to listen to in this, in this area of my life.
Exactly. It's not like you can't have those people in your life anymore. It's going, I know what I can trust and bring to you where you're going to have value, where I want your advice in this specific arena. I experienced the exact same thing. Had a friend group, half of them are not married, a few are. But it taught me really quickly, these are people I love. These are people that I know love me, but they don't have that perspective yet. They're not in a marriage themselves. They don't know what that looks like. They don't have context for even the stuff I'm doing to cause some of the problems. They're not in proximity to me. They just love me. Yeah. So we just have to be careful about the folks that like the information and the like where we unload, where we have safe spaces where we're telling folks, I'm going to say something I don't mean. You know,
it has to line up what we want. Big picture. Your
big picture goal, your like full alignment. And there is a piece of that that's like, that they're also rooting for him. Yes. And that's not always true in your friend group. Yes. Sometimes it's lack of, distance, not proximity, not enough reps. Maybe you're only telling them one side very often so they get a perspective of your spouse. I've also made that mistake. And it has cost a couple of relationships or has shifted those relationships. But that's also not the only area. Like this happens in your career. When you're trying to make a big life change, even a health change, right? You got friends who you're out maybe eating junk food with or drinking with, and you want to make this big shift. It's really hard to do that with folks who are not aspiring to do the same thing.
And so maybe in that particular area of your life, you don't want to follow. And we didn't even think about this, but there's areas of your life where you might follow, but disagree elsewhere.
Absolutely.
And that's okay too. I never thought about
they can coexist
together. I loved your work example because isn't it easy to get around the water cooler and be like really critical and all of those things?
It's contagious.
But then you have to ask the question, like this person I'm standing next to, are they living what I aspire to? And think about it in like the career sense.
Absolutely. And even when you're dealing with management, right? There's sometimes you're put in a situation where you're like, I don't want to actually follow this person, but I'm required to. Like, it doesn't stop there, right? We go back to our choice. We have choices within those situations to decide how we're going to respond, how we're going to react, how we're going to be helpful. And I don't know that I think sometimes the easiest route is to just what they're calling like quiet quitting now, just to live in your frustration, live in your discontentment. And then those are moments where I'm grateful that I've had people go, hey, I've noticed you're not really as energetic. You're not really as excited as you used to be. And so it's like you need to get folks around you to give you the other perspective, but also put you back on, are you following the right folks? Or have you been just listening to a couple of voices instead of asking someone else the question or going and having conversations you really should be having instead of hanging out around the water cooler complaining?
Yeah, God can absolutely use the circumstances in our lives. We do have a great deal of, all the choices in the world, but can use the results of those things. And that's why we're never too far gone. Does somebody that you're following, do they live a life that you aspire to? Do they have the postures that you aspire to? Do they embody the qualities that you want to have? Do they have authenticity? Do they have integrity? Do they try when they fail? Do they get up and do they try again? It's all of these attributes of who it is that you want to be.
So I am living in a situation right now where my current CEO at the company I work at, he's one of those CEOs that like lets his family be a part of the work that we do. So you get to see him with his wife, you get to see him with his kids. I've seen him in really difficult conversations. I've seen him go out of his way for folks. Even for me, when my husband went away for military duty and was deployed for a bit, he like went out of his way to go and ask people, how do I support a military wife? And he has just been this incredible example of being considerate, but also being the kind of Christian I want to be, someone who's using his resources and his reach and his leadership to go and improve the lives of those around him. And it's just been such a cool up close example to go like, oh, that's what this looks like. That's what this could look like for me as I continue in my career, or as I lead in the sisterhood. Like, it's just redefined leadership and given it a little more depth. But I just wanted to share that, like, I'm constantly, at least in this season, I'm constantly looking for people that I want to aspire to. And he's just been a really great example of that.
You said what our next one is so beautifully. Their guidance aligns with biblical truth. And you brought that in because you've gotten to see his faith up close and you've gotten to watch this. And so their guidance, especially if it's, I think we can have people maybe that aren't believers that do speak into our lives in significant ways. But when we want to talk about the voices that we really give a lot of weight to, there is something with their guidance aligning with biblical truth. And let me back up. Even if it's not a believer,
sometimes they're gifted in those areas.
Sometimes their advice will align with biblical truth. And so the question is, does it resonate about what you know to be true? Very intentional in my wording there, because it's like you may go, I don't know what it all, the Bible all says. I don't know all the perfect things. Cool. You know what? With what you do have, does this align with what you know to be true? Whether you're not sure what you believe, whether you've been a believer for 1 minute or, 100 years, it's based on what you know. Does this align with what you know to be true based on biblical truth, not based on like
your
all
inner
truth is your truth and all of those things. And so, a person whose guidance aligns with biblical truth, they're going to encourage you to seek and not just blindly accept.
That's a huge green flag. I don't know if you watch the guy on Instagram that runs around with a green flag.
Oh, love it.
Love him.
Like, he's like, my brother in Christ. Like, he says that all the time. Oh, my goodness.
But
go find that guy. I think he's just called Green Flag Guy.
He might be
on social.
Fantastic.
It's actually really enduring. It's like, this is what the internet needs more of. But anyway,
yes, but what you just gave us is a huge green flag. I think that's so important for folks who are entering into their faith and trying to grow deeper in their faith, to make sure you have folks around you that aren't blocking your questions, that aren't scared of your questions, that aren't scared of...
I will journey with you. I will do it with you. They're willing to say, I don't know. They're willing to do... They don't tell you not to ask questions. They don't just say, well, it is what it is. They want to come alongside you because what they want is to encourage you to grow, not just to blindly accept something. And I think we see this a lot. Let's talk a little bit about churches and pastors. And I mean, my desire is I never want to like trash someone. Like, and that's like, even though we all want to. So I'm not trying to like take a specific group of people and like throw them under the bus. I never want to be like, go do this. I'm like, I want to reveal truths that like, then you go and you need to figure out what this looks like in your life, because is that not
the point?
The point is you figuring out what it looks like in your life.
Yeah.
All right.
For this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think about pastors who, when, a pastor gets on stage or one of those voices and their posture is blindly accept. This is what it says, go do it. They're not doing the work to contextualize it for you. They're not doing the work to adapt their approach. They're not doing the work to help you apply in your life.
Absolutely.
And there is something to challenging, but when somebody's coming at you with like constant yelling absolutes, with gatekeeping, with not being willing to engage with difficult questions and journey with you, or who give really flippant responses and aren't considerate of what it is that you need, like that's a voice you need to take some weight away from. Because how often do we follow the person who makes the best argument in things, and like they say it the loudest, or they say it the most convincing, or they're like, they make these pithy statements and they're very much about the performance of it and not like offering you perspective that's genuine. And it's just something to be really, really, just be cautious of and be aware. Because they make a good argument doesn't mean they're worth following. Because they say it pretty doesn't mean it. Because they look a certain way. Because they have so many followers. You got to decide who is worth following for you.
Absolutely. And it's a scary topic almost, because people get so hurt right in the midst of this. We've got a lot of church hurt going on. You've got a lot of folks who are confused. You've got, I think, more voices than ever because of social media. The confusion is rampant.
Yes.
Don't get boxed into what everyone else is doing. Go to 10 different churches. Figure out different styles of worship, different styles of preaching. Some churches have really great small groups and study groups and youth groups and whatever age group you need. Other folks don't, and they don't offer that, but maybe they have really great teaching. Like, don't box yourself in as you're trying to evaluate these things, not just for churches, but also for the people in your life. Like, do a full evaluation, not based on one conversation or one experience. I wanted to encourage folks to not get roped into that, like, oh, I went once and, it wasn't enough.
No church is going to be the perfect place.
No such thing.
No such thing. And in addition, what matters so much is you living it out. And so sometimes folks are like, my church is imperfect. There is some like, well, go find another church. But there's also this other side of like, why do you feel like that's not a good church? And are those gaps meant to be filled by you? Not like, the welcome team stinks, and so I should be on the welcome team. Not like that. No. I mean, like, hey, my church doesn't get out in the community and do enough social action work.
Go find a place to do that.
Go find a place to do that. Okay, like nothing is stopping you, and so a church isn't a place to be spoon fed. Sometimes that's what we need. A church is meant to be a huddle before you go make the play.
Yes, that's why it's like it's just Sunday.
Yeah, and
you got to figure out Monday through Saturday.
Don't make the energy church. Make the energy taking what you know and going and living it out. Like, get in the huddle. Like, what's the play? Where am I running? Like, and then go do that. Yeah,
I love the picture of a huddle, because you really do want to have folks that you can come around with you and walk it out with you.
All right. In the next three, like, we've hit them in different ways, but let's go through them. All right. Wow. They equip and they don't control.
Like, that's a powerful statement, Sherry. So what does that look like practically? This is, I know you live here, so break that down.
I think about my kids, and something I started praying over my son. I think a dangerous prayer. And it was, God, can you help me see him the way that you see him? God, can you help me like shape him into who you've created him to be and not who I want him to be? Like, God, can you help me see him and not what I wish he was? And that there's something to going, what is my role? What is my part in this? How do I help you become who it is that you're meant to be and who God's created you to be, and not who I think that you should be? And I think in that, when we put our energy there, we learn to take away control and instead try to work to equip. And so that's, I think, is the difference for me. And it's something I struggle with every day because I want to control the things around me. And how do I let go of that to work towards equipping them? And I think when we hear voices that are trying to tell us who we should be, who are trying to tell us how we should vote, who are trying to tell us the right way to do something, the wrong way to do something, who we should like, who we should hate, what we should shout about, what we should, it's like those voices that they're really dogmatic and they're really like, they think everything's everything's right. It's like, are they helping you learn to make decisions for yourself, or are they making you dependent on them? This language makes sense in this context. Are they encouraging codependency, or are they empowering? Because I feel important if you have to come to me for all of these things.
Oh.
I feel important when I'm the authority in your life. I feel important when you listen and I know you're going to do what I say. And so is it someone who's trying to force your hand? Or when you make a choice they wouldn't agree with, they go, oh, like, that's why I told you. And there's moments for that. But there's also like, oh man, I would have made a different choice.
Yeah.
And then they're loving and humble. I can't say this enough. If somebody's dehumanizing someone, man, that is take 10 steps back.
Yeah.
Take 10 steps back, because every person is created in the image of God, and somebody who refuses to acknowledge that and chooses instead hate and chooses instead to treat them like they're nothing or to instill disgust in the people around them, that is not someone worth following. That is not someone worth giving weight in your life to, because we are all created in the image of God. And so someone who's encouraging you to see someone else as less than human or to treat somebody poorly, that is the biggest red flag for me.
It's a huge one.
That is the biggest red flag for me.
And I think sometimes it's super subtle, but...
Name calling.
It's the name calling.
Those people. Ooh. Them.
Even just bringing the same person to you over and over again to complain about it. Mm-hmm. It's like, there's room as friends to, all right, let's process. But yeah. When it becomes the topic of conversation,
but it's somebody that's like for you, they're for you. And so you're coming and you're having those conversations, mm-hmm. but they're not going to, anyway, sorry, I interrupted you, but yes, there are those moments. Yes, there's venting and stuff like that, be careful. But when they're like, this person is garbage. I think I was talking recently and I was like, Gabby, I'm struggling, man. Cause there's there's somebody in my life I feel ashamed sharing this. But really genuinely, there's somebody in my life and I'm like, Gabby, I'm struggling to see this person as a person. I see them as a problem. Yeah. They what I want to do is I want to go on the rant. I want to call them all the names.
Kudos to you for seeing it, calling it out. Because I think there is something to confessing that. Because then he can work with you. When we are trying to paint it as something else and calling it something else, or we have people around us who are covering that piece for us and going like, but we know you don't mean it. Like, no, you need people to tell you like, hey, say the thing you don't really mean. Let's process, but also let me bring you back to the heart of our Father.
Yes.
Like, we're not going to continue to do this.
Yes.
That's not always easy, especially when someone's hurting you, frustrating you consistently. But we have choices. It's hard.
And that's what I want to do. And I want to follow my flesh in that. And here's the thing, though. Do you have people in your life that are leading you to do that, too? Because that's who you're going to become if that's the case.
Yeah, and I would hope that for the folks listening, like, if you're feeling convicted about that, like your Father, he's forgiving. Like we can confess that one another. You can confess that to him. You don't have to feel shame about, oh man, I'm actually the person doing this. But just a reminder, you have a choice. Like, you get to choose now to not do that anymore.
This person that I happen to be talking about, they're not somebody that's welcome in my home. There's boundaries there. There's a lack of trust there. Mm-hmm. There's all of these things. Yep. There's history there, and not like in a nobody's gotten in anybody's face and shouted or anything like that. It's not that, and it's not me just being like, haha, you're cut off. But there are boundaries, and there are boundaries, and there are expectations of respect of those boundaries and things like that. And so that is okay. Treating somebody like they're less than human is not. Yeah. And then, just last thing, is that they're accountable and trustworthy. Trustworthy, they do what they say they're going to do. They follow up. None of us are perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but they strive to be trustworthy.
Yeah.
They're striving for that. And then that accountability, they accept accountability. They apologize. They aren't dodging accountability and
Mm-hmm.
constantly making justifications. And I think we have a lot. We all know people like that. Honestly, like
Mm-hmm.
most of us are like that.
Yeah. It was like AKA us.
None of us want to be told that we're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like people really, truly worth following. Really, they accept accountability because they know it's what makes them better.
The folks that I follow have taught me that that's like one of the biggest keys to growth is being able to accept accountability and then be held accountable to the future. It's something I would encourage folks to pursue. It's a scary ask, but if you have someone in your life that is doing something or lives the way that you aspire to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not in the name of perfection, but in the name of like striving to live out what I say I believe.
Yes.
And the kind of person I want to be and the way I want to be in this world and how I want to impact the world. None of this happens overnight. None of it happens with just lip service. A lot of what we're talking about right now is like being super intentional with your time, your words, your who, your when, all around.
There's a principle that I took on years ago that I think is so significant because we all do need people in our lives that when they talk, we listen. This was a Brene Brown thing. And she basically said, the number of people in your life that when they speak, you truly listen. When they tell you something about yourself, you believe it. Those names, it should be so few that they could fit on a 1-by-1 piece of paper. And I wrote the names down. And it solidified something in my mind and something in my heart about the voices that I listen to. And the weight I give them, like they say something and now I'm angry, or they tell me something about me and I'm like, oh, I don't like that, but I like believe it and I take it on. And then so the intentionality of kind of finding those people in my life who, incidentally
Have all those.
they have these attributes. It made me recognize like, oh my goodness, like that. I love that. It's like identifying those who, wow, when they say something, I'm going to listen. And this is specific to relationships. Like there may be somebody, like it's like there may be folks you follow online, a pastor that you love to follow that's in your church. It could be folks that you don't know. That's not what goes on your square.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is so relational, and this is like the voices you're going to listen to. Not the critics you're going to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Not that these are the people who know me, who know my heart, who know my motives, who know my desires, who I want to be, and they are for me. And so I'm going to listen when they talk.
Absolutely. They kind of have the veto card in your life.
Yes. And so as we kind of wrap up together, I think that finding this person is impossible. Like this person. So now thanks for listening. Here's the things that you need to, people worth following, and they don't exist, have a nice day. No. And so it is difficult to find folks like this, and it's difficult to identify this. And I don't want us to ever walk out of a conversation being like, okay, what do I do right now? Because right now we're talking about looking for things in other people. Like we need to walk out always with, what am I going to do?
Yeah. What do I do with this today?
And I think you're the one who uncovered this when we were talking about this. It's, what do I do today? What is it? Like you said it and you broke my brain.
How do we become people worthy of being followed?
Yes. How do we become a person worth following? And so many of these attributes have so much to do with the way that we treat people. And I think when we treat people this way, sometimes it's like you got to treat people like based on what you see in them that maybe they don't see. And when you do that, you'll watch people become those things. And now it's like, it is this beautiful kind of cyclone of what this is. And because if we're only ever looking for people worth following, we're being a consumer, and then we're naturally going to be critical. It's like, well, you don't check these boxes, thank you, next. But what if you did the work to try to be? There's no arrival. But what if just one little thing at a time, you strived to become somebody worth following? And so today, the challenge is not just to find people worth following and find those voices to listen to, but also to become somebody worth following. And all of these attributes are Christ-like attributes. Like I said, I'm going to drop stuff in the resources.
Absolutely.
And so this is also the journey of growing closer to Jesus, walking nearer to him, and being someone, like Paul said, follow me as I follow Jesus, somebody contextualizing what did it look like to follow Jesus in this specific setting. Well, be someone who's figuring that out so that others can see what it looks like to live out these truths of Jesus too.
Yeah, and that's the good news. You have a helper.
Yep.
Right? Like he'll walk you through each one of these in the order he desires, and that's the exciting part. That's like we're not looking for perfection,
Yes.
You're looking for progress.
And that's what we can walk away with today, is becoming somebody worth following. And you will begin to recognize those attributes in others then. And this is one of those incredible practical things that can make life better today. Be someone worth following. Find people worth following and watch what happens. And this is an incredible way that we can uncomplicate faith because there are so many voices out there. So find the ones that are worth following. Do you have any parting thoughts?
I'm just excited for what this means for anyone who hears this. Sometimes we just need to be prompted to reflect. I'm excited for the folks who are going to realize like, oh, I didn't know I was following this person so heavily. And maybe you're starting to see some of the fruit of that and you're not loving it. Maybe you're ready to get away from folks who are constantly creating anxiety or guilt or shame in your life. You know, we all want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be loved. But the truth is you have a Father who loves you already. And he desires for you to have quality folks to follow. But more than anything, he wants you to follow him.
Yes.
So if we just stick there, I can testify that my entire circle has changed and I am surrounded by incredible people. My square has a lot of names and I know that that's a blessing, but it wasn't by chance. It took some intentionality to go, okay, I need to start changing myself.
Little steps at a time. Watch what God does.
Exactly.
All right. So, like I said, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So grateful for your time and your insight. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week. Well, I loved this conversation with Gabby. Honestly, I didn't want it to end, and I hope that it was a blessing to you today. I'm walking away with a different perspective, and I hope that's true for you as well. And so if you haven't already subscribed to the Everyday Truths podcast, I hope you'll do that wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, so you don't miss any of our episodes that come out. And so until next week, I'll see you then.